Everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening for our workshop on food safety and how to implement practices after like a natural disaster, and especially today, in, with the Kona lows that recently hit, what to do after flooding. I'm very excited to introduce Lisa Rhoden. She will be our guest presenter today. She's with North Shore EVP, and they do group gap and harmonized gap across the state. And they've been doing wonderful work getting our farms ready to be food safety certified so that they can get into the broader wholesale and farm to school programs and institutional purchasing. And her team is very knowledgeable. They've been really pioneering things. So, really excited to have you guys part of this webinar today. Also, just like to give a shout out to the National Farmers Union. They are the ones who provided the funding to help support these events. We'll be holding another webinar here in the coming months and an in-person event on Kauai Island, just to support farmers around education and food safety. With that, I will hand it over to Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christian. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share screen here and get my presentation up for y'all. As you guys know, I am the Executive Director of Hawaiʻi GroupGAP. My name is Lisa Rhoden, and I may have spoken with some of you before this afternoon, but if not, it's good to meet you online. We're going to talk today about post-storm food safety issues, and I think this is really a useful presentation, not only because of the issues that we all just experienced back in March and April, but it is hurricane season now, and we are expecting a possibly more active season. So this is good for preparation as well as just remembering what to do in the future. So first thing I'd like to talk about just a little bit is what I am going to discuss today. I'd like to cover just some considerations for the operation. Each of you, your operation is going to be a little bit different and customized, so we're going to talk broadly. But we do want to cover assessing crop exposure after flooding, very importantly, how to determine what you can harvest, if anything, and then best practices for immediately after the event, as well as preparedness strategies. So these are really important topics, and hopefully we can discuss more together afterwards. I'd like to start off, though, with a definition, because I think it's really important to kind of define what is flooding or what isn't flooding. And this is really useful because we want to identify flooding as something different than pooling or ponding. That is something that is frequently seen at farms, nurseries, in pastures, etc. So first, pooling or ponding is the result of soil saturation, and it's usually caused by overwatering. So that is something that happens. We forget what's going on. We leave it on. Sometimes we have a break in the line. And sometimes it's from rain. Sometimes it's just a really heavy, fast downpour. We've all seen this happen after rainfall, especially lately. And typically in a ponding or pooling situation, the water is absorbed before too long, so it doesn't stick around. Flooding, though, is different for two main reasons. It's more severe than pooling, and it's generally caused by something that is well outside of the grower's control. So while both of these things, pooling and ponding, can be caused by rainfall, we actually want to distinguish between them in a few other ways. So first, we're going to look at pooling not being uncommon. It's something that happens a lot, especially where we have irrigation on. So this is something that's a little bit different than flooding. Flooding, hopefully, is not becoming a common situation. Ponding generally, or pooling, either word, generally does not contaminate the edible portion of the crop. And it might cause plant stress, it might reduce yield, it might even cause plant death, but it doesn't usually act as a carrier of pathogens. It's something that happens right there in a spot, and then the water goes down. Floodwaters, though, a little bit different. They usually originate from another body of water, and that may contain some harmful contaminants as well as debris. And so for this reason, floodwaters are much more detrimental to crops because of the hazards that are contained in them. Just going to move on to hazards now. So we're going to do a little flooding and food safety 101 coverage. Hazards, something that has the potential to cause harm And in the food safety sector, we really focus on three types of hazards: biological, chemical, and physical. You can see on the other side of the slide some specific examples. In the biological category, we've got things like bacteria, viruses, parasites, feces. Hair can be one. That's not normally something we see in flooding situations, but at an operation in general. Chemical, cleansers, sanitizers, pesticides, all of those types of things. And then for the physical, anything that might come down in that water: glass, plastic, metal, rocks, things like that. So those are our hazards. Typically, when you are seeking a food safety certification, as an operation, you've done a risk assessment of these types of hazards. And that usually means that you've gone through and identified where these things might come from, and you've got some type of mitigation strategy to either correct or even prevent them. Flooding, though, is a little bit different because every operation has a level of hazards present. And you're usually used to them, you know what they are, and you've, again, got your mitigation measures. In a flooding situation, that is overloaded. We're not only looking at a magnitude of hazards that are coming in, but we're also looking at what the floodwater is carrying, and that is atypical. You're not usually on your operation going to be faced with water that has sewage in it or large debris like trees or vehicles or something else. So this is overwhelming for most people, but it's something that you're going to have to deal with. So the first thing I think that's important to really talk about is your number one priority in this situation is to take care of yourself. That's really important because you can't take care of other people or other things if you yourself aren't taken care of. I think it's really important to share resources around that, especially because sometimes just talking about something out loud with another person, sharing your concerns, your fears, your challenges can be a bit of a relief. So I think that that's just really important to put out there. And I've got a couple resources here. Hopefully you can take a picture of the screen, and this will get put out as well, so you'll have it yourself if you do need that help. And in particular, for really critical needs, time-sensitive needs, there is a crisis helpline to help you out and give you some place to reach out to. I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to the Seeds of Wellbeing. This is a program that was originating, I think, right around the pandemic. And I think it's really a good resource because it is specifically designed for farmers. There are vouchers available to you to use this program. You can scan the QR code, you can email them. If you just go to their website, this is available for you to take a look at. That's where I got it from. So just wanted to point all of this out because it is just really important to take care of yourself in these situations that are not things that we face every day. And especially when your livelihood is on the line, it can be really distressing to have to deal with it. The second priority, though, after you've kind of address your own needs and those of your family, is to really start to look at what does your operation need. And for that, one of the biggest things is just to be safe and be cautious as you go around beginning your cleanup, assessing your damage. Very important to think about your PPE. It might not be the first thing on your mind. You want to get out there and you want to see what's going on, but it is important to remember you should wear rubber boots if you have them, protect your eyes, protect your bare skin. You don't necessarily know what contaminants are present in that water, and you want to avoid getting that in your eyes or on your skin and causing an infection or sickness. So I think that these are just some kind of basic things, but good reminders and hopefully good resources. So now that you're ready to assess your crops after a flooding event or situation, from a food safety standpoint, this is probably one of the easier things to do. And that is to really look at, is the edible portion of your crop affected or exposed to those floodwaters? If that's the case, it is considered adulterated and it should not be eaten, not even if you're going to keep it yourself, not if you're going to plan to give it away. It should not be eaten at all. This is especially important for leafy greens, low-growing produce, root vegetables, things that grow down on the ground. So just to repeat, it is the rule. That is the produce safety rule. It is considered adulterated if it touches the floodwater. The edible portion of the crop touches the floodwater, so not to be eaten. I think that this is considered a good thing. Some people say good or bad, but I think it's good because this is not ambiguous. It's not subjective. It's very cut and dried. If the edible portion of the crop touched the floodwater, then don't eat it. But there are still some cases where the situation might be unclear. So a couple examples. What if the edible portion of the crop emerged after the flood? What if the edible portion is above the floodwater? So some examples of that, maybe you have snap pea plants. They're tall, maybe they survive the flooding, but the fruit sets afterwards. Or maybe you have citrus trees or some other orchard crop. It's in a flooded field. The floodwaters didn't reach the level of the fruit. So in those cases, what do you do? Well, of course, there are some things that you're going to have to consider, right? So if the edible portion of the crop emerged after the flood event, and you can harvest it safely without risk of cross-contamination. So you're not walking through flooded areas and then getting that crop harvested and maybe walking back through a flooded area. The likelihood of risk is lower. Similarly, for an orchard situation, for example, if the edible portion of the crop is growing above that floodwater level and you can harvest it safely, it's not going to get splashed, then again, the likelihood of the risk is low. So you're always going to want to think about how your process to harvest is going to affect that. Is there potential to splash? If you drop a fruit or something, you got to leave it there. You're not going to pick it back up. That should be the norm anyway, but particularly in a situation like this. So if there's some confusion around it, just keep in mind, are you looking at where the edible portion of the crop is? And then what is the cross-contamination potential that's happening right there? So a couple other considerations, though, need to be taken into account in these situations. Even if the risk level is determined to be low, some things to think about. One is uptake of contaminants. This one is tough because there's not a lot of research out there yet to help us make a determination on this specifically, but we do know that there is evidence that contaminants can be taken up by the plant. So I think in this case, as the grower, you make that assessment. You know what is likely in that water because it's around your operation, and that can help you assess whether harvesting the crop is worth it or not. Again, this is only in situations where the floodwater did not actually touch the crop, the edible portion of the crop itself. So important to think about that. What do you know about that water that has flowed through your area? You should also consider the likely hazards that are around your operation when you harvest, and think about, what do you normally see versus what's happening during this flood event. Keep in mind that some product, even though it may not be acceptable for human consumption, it might be able to be diverted to animal feed. So again, that might be something that you can look at to help your income stream. However, you still have to consider, again, the possible hazards with that. And one of the ones that we didn't really talk about earlier, but should mention is mold. Very important. We don't want that getting into animal feed. Bacteria and heavy metal contamination are also two others that you can test for. And so if that feels like that's a possibility and you have sufficient amount of crop to possibly consider that, testing first to ensure that it's safe for animals to consume might be a way through that process. So then we want to talk about some of the other things that you need to do in this immediate aftermath of a flooding event and with respect to food safety. Of course, you're going to want to go determine the damage. So you're going to want to get out there and you're going to see what has happened, and you want to think about what you can document. Very important first to think about how many acres were affected. And is there anything that you can save? So again, going back to these questions we were just talking about harvestable product, anything that touched the floodwaters is not salvageable, but anything that was above the level or hasn't emerged at that point in time, but will emerge afterwards, that could be salvageable product. While you're making those assessments, it's really a good idea to document everything you can by taking photos. If you have records to help you with claims like insurance records, sales receipts, sales records, start to gather that. When we say records, a lot of times people have a very specific thing in mind, but a record can be a list. It can be a sales receipt. It can be from your credit card statement, maybe. So those can all be considered records. So start to gather those things if you can. And if you need help determining what should you get together, local support organizations can help with that, particularly the Farm Service Agency. They do have a disaster response group. When you start to document, you want to do that as detailed as possible. So some of the things that you're going to want to remember to write down, the date of the flood event, what parts of your operation were impacted. This is where a farm map comes in handy because you can just draw that information in. So if you don't already have a farm map, taking the opportunity to go on Google Earth and just get in there and get yourself a good map that shows where your operation is. You don't have to do anything fancy in Google Earth to outline it or anything like that. Just print it out and outline it yourself. Once you have that, you can also note a couple other important dates or pieces of information. One is what date or range of dates did the water begin to recede? That's really important because you want to be able to determine the amount of time that your operation was impacted by the floodwaters themselves. How long were they there? And then if you have information about when you planted out each field, the estimated harvest date or the crops that you planted in there so that you can figure that out, you can note that even on the map. That's a good place to put it all in one on one document. It's also good if you have a sense of where the floodwater came from to note that. Was it from a stream? Was it from a reservoir? Was it from, a property above you that has animals? Any little bits of information that you can include there is really helpful. And then, of course, anything that you saw and know to have been a hazard in that floodwater. So if you saw vehicles, if you saw trees, carcasses, anything like that is information that you are going to want to include. And again, having that all on a farm map, it's all in one place. It's really, really helpful. So if you don't have that already, I really suggest that as a place to start. If you are signed up with FSA, you can probably get a map from them, or you can, again, just go on any kind of mapping system. Google Earth is great. There are others to pull that up. One of the first questions that comes up after an event like this is, when can you replant, right? Because everybody needs to get back to normal as quickly as possible and get that income stream back going. So in general, guidelines from the FDA recommend that you wait at least 30 to 60 days and do not replant until the fields are dried out. If you have access to some heavy equipment and you can get it into your field when it's dry enough, you might try turning your field over to help it dry out a little bit more. So that's kind of a little extra to try to move it along a little bit more quickly. Soil testing is also very helpful to determine if bacterial contamination is present and at what levels. I feel like this is most useful if you already have some knowledge of what the level of contamination was prior to the flood event. So if you didn't have that, we don't really know how to compare. But if you do get your soil tested, I would recommend looking at that level. We want to see low generic E. coli levels below 10 MPN or CFU, which is mean probable number or colony forming units, for 10 days straight. That's ideal. Again, if you haven't taken a soil sample already, it's really hard to tell whether you're comparing apples to apples or not. So I feel like that one is, do what you can do with that. The other important thing, though, as you're preparing to replant is really to think about how are you going to do that with the tools and equipment that you have? What do you need to use? can you clean and sanitize those so that they're ready to go and then be cleaned and sanitized after? If you have the ability to maybe flag off areas that were flooded from areas that weren't, that way you don't harvest contaminated product or inadvertently walk through contaminated areas. That's a really solid best practice. If it's useful, even constructing a buffer zone, so you've got, 10 to 30 feet in between fields, that could be helpful for preventing entry into an affected field or out of an affected field. Another thought is if you do have harvestable product, and we ran into this during the Kona Low event, some folks did have harvestable product, but did not have the ability to wash it on site. And so using a facility outside of the impacted area might be helpful. If you know of someone who does have clean water that you can use, municipal water, going there to use their facility for post-harvest would be very helpful. Some secondary issues that might come up in a situation like this would be cold storage. If the power went out, has any of your product that was in there been lost? Does the unit still work? Was it affected by the floodwater? This is something where you're going to have to assess if it still works. Can you get it back up and running? And can you clean and sanitize it so that you can use it if so? Anything that floodwaters have touched, you're going to want to clean and sanitize, particularly if it is a food contact surface. If you're using well water, was your well impacted? That might require testing before you can be sure that the well is safe to use again. If you have municipal water, your guidance is going to come from the Board of Water Supply, but you want to be aware of any localized issues at your own site, like damaged pipes. Maybe a crack in the pipe can allow other things to get in there, and then your municipal water is compromised. The other thing, again, keeping in mind, preventing cross-contamination, really, really important. So if you have enough tools to use separate ones in your flooded areas versus your non-flooded areas, that's great. If you don't have enough, that's okay. You just want to clean and sanitize more frequently and really think about what would be a proper sequence of work, meaning you work in your non-flooded areas first, and then you move into your flooded areas, and that reduces the chance of cross-contamination from flooded to non-flooded spaces. You're always going to do your cleaning and sanitizing, but at least thinking through how you're going to do your day, how to arrange your tasks in such a way that cross-contamination is minimized. I want to just touch on the water situation too, municipal water briefly, because this came up last March. Municipal water certainly can be affected by flooding, and the Board of Water Supply, it's their kuleana to issue guidance. This is going to come out in two ways. It's either going to be an advisory, which is a voluntary issuance, and it means that contamination to the municipal supply is possible. It could be a notice. If it's a notice, that means that contamination is confirmed in the system and the notice is required by law. When this happened back in March, that notice came out and the guidance was to boil water for at least 3 minutes before consumption, and to use for other tasks and or to drink bottled water. The boil water guidance is important because it's for any water that you might be drinking or cooking with or washing with. But if you're a farm and you have post-harvest tasks to do and you still have product that you can do that on, boiling water to do that might not be really a practical solution. How are you going to boil enough water and cool it down and use it on your product? So in this case, I would suggest considering the use of a product like Sanidate or some other sanitizer that is approved to control or reduce human pathogens. That's really what we're looking at here. We want to make sure that that statement is on the label somewhere. And so think about that rather than trying to boil enough water for all of your cleaning needs post-harvest. And always remember, of course, to take a look at the label. Our team is always happy to help you folks understanding a label, finding a product, or figuring out dilution rates. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have these types of questions, whether you're in GroupGAP or not. This is really critical, and we're happy to help and provide some guidance and some support. Okay, I wanted to provide a little bit of Kalo-specific guidance here too, because this is, of course, a very important crop for us. And so if you have flooding in your Kalo field, unfortunately, you may have to destroy the current crop if it's impacted by the floodwaters, even if your harvest is still a few months away. And that's again because of that uptake situation. However, if you have huli to replant, it's okay to do that once your field is ready. You do want to remove any parts of the huli that might have had any kind of um, touch to the floodwaters because we want to make sure there's no chemical contaminants on there or any other types of contaminants on there. It's also possible that you might do a sanitizing bath with your huli, so put them in something to prevent any cross-contamination and make sure that they're as clean as possible. So again, hollow specific stuff, it's kind of similar to regular crop. If it is touched by the floodwaters or impacted by the floodwaters, you are going to have to destroy that. But you may be able to replant and get that going a little bit faster given the huli. And if you clean them, then hopefully they're going to be solid and ready to go. Some other best practices that I just wanted to mention. Food safety certification, even if you're not getting certification, food safety practices, we really stress heavily that cleaning and sanitizing is important, especially of any food contact surfaces. It's really important to remember that a food contact surface is really anything that food might touch. So it could be a table that you're sorting on, it could be a scale, it could be a cooler that you're putting product in to transport it. It could be your reefer system, your drying racks, anything like that is a food contact surface. Couple notes on that. Smooth, non-porous stuff is easier to clean. It doesn't get bacteria and dirt and things stuck in the grooves. So things like stainless steel are a better choice than wood or even plastic. If you're setting up an operation, a wash pack, or you're resetting up after this flood situation, you want to look to replace items ideally with things like stainless steel because they are going to hold up better and be better for food safety. The other thing to note is that cleaning and sanitizing are really two different steps, and they're very, very important all the time, but definitely in a situation like this. Cleaning is the first step, and that is a step that is done with soap and clean water. And the reason that we do that is because cleaning really does remove the dirt particles, it removes grease, it removes debris from the surface. After cleaning, sanitizing is the step to reduce microbial contamination, and that will not be effective if the surface is not cleaned first. I always kind of get on my husband for that because he likes to wipe everything down with Clorox wipes. And I'm like, no, you have to use soap first. I don't bug him too much because I want to stay married. But so anyway, that's really important. Cleaning and sanitizing, not the same thing. They are two separate steps, and you do want to do your due diligence and do both of them as best you can. The last thing I wanted to put on up here for you, because I don't want to drone on and on forever, but some resources. I was looking through some of the flood resources recently, and I did not realize until I did that CTAR actually has a wonderful emergency response website. So I put this one up here. This is the floods page. I just took a screenshot of it, but if you go to cms.ctar.hawaii.edu/ER for emergency response, you will find it. And it has some really great documents and resources available for you for flooding. In addition to that, they actually have other events that might be necessary, emergency events. So in addition to the flooding, there's some information available on volcanic eruptions, fires, hurricanes, and general disaster preparedness. So I think that this is really, really great because it is a dedicated page to emergencies, which is so helpful. You don't want to go looking through a million different things when you're looking for help after something really stressful. So definitely check that out if you get the chance to. A couple other resources that are available. The Produce Safety Alliance, they're known for their Food Safety Modernization Act training. but they have a food safety for flooded farms fact sheet, which I find is very helpful. There's a QR code you can scan for that, or I did put the link here. There's also an FDA document that's about safety of food and animal crops when there's been a hurricane, a flood, or a power outage. Kind of long, but certainly take advantage of it, especially if you can't sleep and you want something to read to get you there. And then locally, I think it's really important to note that we've got a great resource at the Department of Ag and Biosecurity, and that's Joey Ooka. Some of you guys may have met him before. He does farm readiness reviews for FSMA training, but Joey is not only really knowledgeable about the FSMA produce safety rule, but he also has really good contacts. So if you have a question and he can't answer it, he has got some nationwide folks that he can outsource that question to and get you an answer. So I like to make sure everybody knows Joey is your key person at the HDAB office. And then finally, of course, we're here to help. We run the Hawaiʻi GroupGAP program, and we help folks get food safety certified. We are food safety nerds. We love your food safety questions. So please ask us, or if you just need general help, like how do I dilute my pesticides or my sanitizers, let us know. We're definitely happy to help you. We do have food safety specialists on Hawaii Island, Kauai, and Oahu who can assist you in person if needed, but we're always happy to help out remotely as well. So I think that's it. For me, I'm going to stop sharing, and I guess we'll see if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was a really comprehensive overview of food safety in the aftermath of flooding. And, it's so pertinent right now, especially with the Kona low. And like you said, with the hurricane season starting, and this is supposed to be what are they calling it? The super El Nino. So, they're expected to have more
Yeah,
adverse
scary.
weather coming our way. But yeah, at this point, if people have any questions for Lisa, this would be a great time. You can either shoot them into the chat, or can you come off mute? I'm not sure. Ash, how we're doing that.
Yeah, I'll open it up now so they can.
All right. So, any questions? Okay, I have one.
Uh-oh.
I'll start us off. How about that? Break the ice. So say you have there's a lot of rain, you have sort of flooding, but you sort of know your farm it's contained. There's no flood waters coming from off farm, and your farm is, it's essentially a clean-ish farm. What do those same rules apply? Say for hollows, hey, I got runoff from my own farm from fallow fields that have nothing on it. What would you do in an instance like that?
I feel like that situation is more of a pooling situation rather than a flood, particularly when you know what your situation is on your own farm. And hopefully you're already, because you know that you're already mitigating, you're not spilling anything that might end up in the field. I think of flooding as a more severe situation where what's coming onto the farm is out of your control and you don't necessarily have a good handle on all the things that might be in there.
Got it. Wonderful. Thank you. Looks like we got a question here in the chat. I'll read it out so everyone can hear it. With kalo and flooding, if plants are younger, so more than 2 to 3 months until maturity, would those be able to stay in the ground, or should they be discarded?
I asked that same question too, and the response that I got was they should be discarded because of the uptake potential, which I thought was, that's such a bummer and such an unfortunate situation. So yeah, I would say you probably got to take it out.
Yeah. And with these longer term crops, this has such a longer term impact financially to farmers in cases like this. Say if you have a
Absolutely.
kalo crop where you're planting weekly and it's 9 months until it matures.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have a farm that we were talking with because they're in our program on Maui that got hit, and they had Brussels sprouts that was just about to harvest. And that was, 5 months, and it got taken out. And I just was like, my God, that's basically that's a whole year. before you can see that crop again. And just, yeah, it's awful. I honestly think this is something that, as a sector, the ag sector, we really probably need to start thinking about, because we are getting these more frequent, very severe storms. Are there insurance programs that can be tweaked to better help small farmers with these specialty crops and, situations like this? I mean, I know we're not growing these big commodity things, but the weather events that we're having are severe and continuing.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that came up after these storms was that I think Hawaii, there's like a very, very small percentage of its farmers are actually have crop insurance, and those who do, they're like these larger commodity crops. Um, and I think, the USDA has the insurance, but it's like most farmers just opt out of it, right? Because
Hmm.
it's very complicated, especially if you're highly diversified. If you're under a certain scale, it's they have like barriers set up essentially.
Yeah,
Then on top of that, in the when your weather's fine and things are going well, you don't want to take on another expense, and you don't really think about doing it until something like this happens.
right.
So it's like, how can it's always like having to juggle those sort of those things that, as a farmer. I know Hawaii Farmers Union, this is one of the things we've been looking at because our, National Farmers Union, they do have insurance. Through some of the other chapters and the industries, they have an insurance. It's called Farmers Union Insurance. Um, and we've been trying to get them to come to Hawaii, but it's just, you know, they haven't bitten yet. We've been
Hmm.
working on them, but I also know that even they've had to pull out of certain states because there's been this increase in natural disasters, and they just can't. It's essentially insurance is still a business, whether we like it or not, the way they look at it.
Yeah.
So it's this ongoing challenge. But yeah, definitely agree. I think there needs to be more state, at the local level, there needs to be more state support for these kind of things.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to figure out. And yeah, you're right. The insurance situation, it is a business. They're gonna have to make money, and not lose money. And we all, as folks who live here, whether you own your home or you rent, you've probably been faced with some aspect of that. And it's happening all across the country and for homeowners. So yeah, yeah, we need some new ideas.
Yes, yes. They can make a little less money, in my opinion, but
I agree.
All right, we're getting sidetracked here. Food safety. Any other questions for food safety? Come on, you guys gotta have some more. This is a great opportunity to weigh in here. Ooh, I should have came with a list prepared. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, unless is there any closing comments, Lisa, that you'd like to make, or if
Well, I just would reiterate, if you guys do come up with a question, please do feel free to reach out. You can reach us through our website. You can reach us through Christian and Ash, and just get in touch, because we are happy to help. And if we don't know the answer, we will help to point you in the right direction. But one of the things that we really feel good about offering to the farmers in our group, particularly, as well as others, is we know you guys are busy and you have other things to do. And so hunting down an answer or a protocol or something like that is not really what you need to be doing. We will do that for you. So please reach out and let us support you if you need it.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys all for taking some time out of you guys' busy afternoons. We will be having some more of these here one in the coming up soon. This is also going to be something that we're going to be putting a little bit more emphasis on as an organization, really trying to support our farmers to get food safety ready, how to get involved in institutional purchasing, how to get involved in, getting food directly into the school system to feed our keiki. So this is hopefully going forward, we'll have some more of these partnering with Lisa and the other statewide partners. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming today, and we'll talk to you all soon.